let's take a look at the craziness that is social media. So I've been doing this little thing here, for like the last, maybe like month, where we see what pops up on my social media feed, just to show absolutely how ridiculous social media is. This one I thought was good. We'll start with this one. I don't know a lot about this guy, Jake Shields, but he pops up on my feed, and it says, here are two white men, likely infiltrators, who try to burn an American flag. An elderly Middle Eastern man fights with them to stop them from burning the flag. So this is interesting, right? So, maybe, a few days ago, they had that whole issue of people going to the Capitol and protesting when Netanyahu was here. And they had what looked like people wearing like kifaya, like people wearing some Palestinian clothes or something like that. And of course, it looked suspicious, and it garnered a lot of negative attention because people were like, oh, look, man, you got all these Palestinian supporters and Muslims out here burning the American flag. And it of course, was a bad look. But now, and this is everything with social media, where it comes to light that it looks like these people that were doing that were probably some type of agent provocateur, right? Maybe some people that were sent there by Chuck to come and disrupt. So it turns out that actually some of the people fighting him not to burn the flag were Palestinian. All right, what else have we got here? Ah, yes. So I wrote this one the other day. Actually, yesterday, it says 7 hours ago. But I just thought this was funny, right? So everybody's up in arms about whether or not Trump actually got shot at legitimately or whether it was staged. And I said, what's even more worthy of attention is that Trump seems to have done a 180-degree turn on Bitcoin. Nobody seems to be talking about that, including the MAGA people who are just like a deer in headlights. I mean, you talk about Manchurian candidates, that is the MAGA people. So what's even more worthy of attention is that Trump seems to have done a 180-degree turn on Bitcoin and crypto, where once he was quite against it, right? So at one point, Trump was like super duper anti-crypto. And now he appears to be pro-crypto, which I think is a little bit suspicious. So I said it's more than his ear that is fake, whether it is or not, who knows, right? What is fake and what is worthy of attention is, right, the character and the candidate that MAGA are voting for has a different script this time around. So I was telling a friend of mine the other day, I was like, all these MAGA people, and I'm not like, obviously I'm not pro-Trump, but I'm not anti-Trump, like he's the greatest person, or the worst person ever in the world, right? I think the man is a moral catastrophe. I think he is what he has been in the past. Like he's a TV personality and he knows how to work that very well. Now, and that's why I wrote the character and the candidate. So the first version of Trump, the first version of the president or the potential presidential candidate, he ran on a platform that was supposedly an anti-establishment candidate. And he was allegedly both anti-Democrat establishment and anti-Republican establishment. And of course, his whole shtick was, I'm going to drain the swamp. And so he ran as a candidate allegedly being very anti-establishment. But now for the sequel, that is he has a completely different script. right? A new director came in, a new producer, and they have written a new script. And so he's playing a different character. Yes, he's still wearing the same bad-fitting suits. So he has the same prop designer and the same set director, but he is reading off of a different script, and the character is different this time. And so what we see now is Trump is actually now having become pro-establishment. So bringing in people like J.D. Vance, I think really demonstrates how much of a move Trump is now to the center, and by center I mean establishment. He is pro-money. At one point, crypto was bad, Bitcoin was bad and fake and all this stuff. Now all of a sudden he's super pro-crypto. Even though it seems he's backed away from it, he was interested in bringing in Jamie Dimon. And I think these things show that he is definitely not the person that we thought the first time around. And this is really sad for the MAGA crew that seem to be incapable of any kind of even even a subjective view of him. Forget about objective. What the hell? She looked almost as full of joy as Ellen Page. Wow, yeah, look at our culture. Imagine being 42, child-free, stress-free, and being this happy. The right hates this. Well, hate is a strong word. I think that, yeah, this is a really weird thing. And I know it tends to be more of like a Republican GOP, talking point, but I do think it's disturbing when you think about, and I don't think she picked him, but when Kamala Harris, when she was given the nod to run as the Democrat president on the ticket, when they were talking about who was going to be, her running mate, they were saying perhaps like, Pete Buttigieg. And of course, that means you would have like a childless lady along with a homosexual who is also childless. Forget about the adoption part, right? And so I think it was interesting noting that our country seems to be moving in a direction where children are seen as like a problem or a liability, right? Child-free, stress-free, the fact that you would put those two together as well as being happy. A Jewish rabbi, Yosef Mizrahi, insults Virgin Mary and calls her a prostitute who cheated on her husband, your greatest ally. She's another one that pops up a lot in my feed, Dr. Anastasia Maria Lupis. Yeah, I mean, however you choose to swallow that, it is interesting that the religious right that often say that we must stand with Israel and Israel and Israel, committed, and this is a mainstream Jewish opinion on Jesus, the son of Mary, Isa, Sayyidina Isa ibn Maryam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's interesting that they feel this way. Michael Walsh says, Western men need to read The Taming of the Shrew stat. Yes, the young guy. I don't know where he's from. Sounds like he might have been from like Iceland or something. Look how they turned him from friendly to hating them in 30 seconds. Yeah, that was a funny clip. If you haven't seen it, there was some young European kid. I don't know if he was from like, his accent sounded like he might have been from a Scandinavian country, maybe Sweden or Iceland or Finland or something. So anyway, initially they're asking him like, hey, what'd you think about the football match that was between Mali and Israel? And he was like, it was pretty good, but he was like, Mali was really good. And so this Israeli guy, this little gremlin walks up, this little like hobbit looking dude with his hobbit wife walks up and disrupts his interview and is like holding up his little scarf. And ironically, he's like, no politics here. And then he starts holding up his flag. And then when the kid is like, I'm not talking about politics, I'm talking about the football match. And the guy keeps repeating it. And so, of course, the kid is like, all right, fine. If you want to be a jerk about it, then, then he starts, doing free Palestine. Of course, and then the guy starts to drop some F-bombs on him. Communists marched in Philadelphia today. Why don't we give them what they're asking for? We should create a program where communists can be traded to communist countries and we trade them for people who want freedom. Do you like my proposal? This is what I mean about social media. It's so, such a bizarre thing. Ryan Dawson, give a title to this scene. Obviously, this is some sort of AI imagery, although in some ways not too far off the mark. Robert Carter. These sort of filthy, unhygienic Tommy Robinson supporting scumbags are the type to call Muslims dirty and smelly because of wudu practices and exotic cuisine. The reality is that Muslims wash themselves 5 times a day. These louts likely have no basic hygiene skills. That's the thing about social media. It really subjects you to a lot of negativity. This is unbelievable. Brother Imam Omar Suleiman, Hafidhahullah, he said, what? I hate sharing, but while you have so many who still parrot lies about beheaded Israeli babies, the images of more beheaded Palestinian babies continues to haunt us. Yeah, this is unbelievable, man. A man carrying his child, the decapitated body of his child is... This is why I tell people, honestly, you might want to rethink about the amount of exposure you give yourself to social media, because when you're scrolling, it's in some ways you never know what you're going to get next. You might get a cat video, you might get some craziness about some Israeli propaganda, and then you get something really, really heavy like that. So, this is why I do this. You should really, do you need to even come on this? I mean, look, and I think, my social media is pretty tame, and this is what the algorithm is sending me. Russell Brand, did Jill Biden see the same Olympics opening ceremony as the rest of us? Let's see what he says here.
Spectacular. The rain did not dampen our spirits. And Casey, honestly, every step of the way, I was thinking to myself, oh my God, how are we going to top this? How are we going to top this?
I wonder what Olympic opening ceremony Jill Biden was watching. She seems to have really enjoyed it. And she talks in her memoir about being at least in a Catholic setting alongside her husband, although she doesn't explicitly state that she is Catholic.
Wow. I mean, that is really despicable, right? So if you haven't seen it, right, the whole crazy Paris Olympics opening, in which there was some weird guy who was painted blue that had his testicles hanging out, and then there was also a young girl, a minor, that was present there as well, and yet we have Jill Biden calling this wonderful. And from what I haven't seen it myself, but actually Brother Dawood, who I just did the podcast with a little bit earlier, he had mentioned that supposedly France or somebody with the Olympics actually had to issue a statement of apology because of how absolutely bad that was. Let's see what else have we got here. All right, Nick Delulis. Begin Far Middle episode 147 with an Only in America sports dedication, followed by further examining John Stuart Mill's On Liberty. Many takeaways to share, notably the worth of a state in the long run is the worth of individuals composing it. Now, this is interesting because actually, oh man, this has got to be like 4 or 5 years ago. When I was doing a class about modernity and post-modernity and liberalism and actually I think it was a class, what did we call it? I think it was called like the Dr. Sherman Jackson Reader. So I was doing a class on like some articles Dr. Sherman Jackson wrote, and I had, when we were talking about liberalism and secularism and a few other things, so he and some other academics made reference to John Stuart Mill, who was kind of like a major figure in the development of secularism, particularly in the modern period, and its influence on like education and other things, and that very succinctly, right? So Mill was a person that wanted to kind of create a kind of almost secular religion, or he wanted to create a secularism that in some ways mimicked or invoked the same reverence that people have for religion. So it was it's interesting that they invoke John Stuart Mill here. All right, who's this cat? Clint Russell, I'm voting for Nephilim Joe Biden, and no, you can't change my mind. Yeah, I know, it's really funny. Like, they're saying like he's like 3 inches taller or something, and all of a sudden I guess they did the software update. Maybe Joe Biden was suffering from that cyber thing that they had the other day. Maybe they finally gave him the software update. All right, what do we got here? Wall Street Ape says ex-Democratic voter shares experiences of liberals showing their true colors. So ever since I showed support, I've showed support my support to Donald Trump. The internet has called me a clown. I'm not educated. I'm not black. They wish Donald Trump would rape my daughters. Oh my God, unbelievable. But that aside, I think what's interesting is how people are still squaring off Republican versus Democrat. That's just the part to me that I find neither of them have any convincing narrative. Jackson Hinkle wrote, historic video, Venezuelan military refuses to shake hands with President Maduro's Zionist opponent, Maria Corina, who called on the U.S. to invade Venezuela. Man. Yeah, I saw a clip actually about Maduro, who I don't know a lot about. I mean, he's a politician at the end of the day, but he did seem to have some solidarity with the Palestinians. Changing of the guard, India-Pakistan border. All right, wow. Yes, I'm sure some of you have seen this clip too of a Moroccan mixed martial artist who just absolutely decimates. Yeah, man, he put him to sleep like NyQuil. Knocked my man out. And it's true. This is what happens when Israelis are not allowed to use weapons. And I would say when they actually have to fight men instead of terrorizing babies and children. Olympic opening ceremony, dancers performed the myocarditis dance, simulating athletes who've died suddenly on national television. Two Egyptian black belts decide to raise the Palestinian flag after defeating a Zionist. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of this. Now, this post earlier, I don't know this brother, Muhammad Yasser Al-Hanafi. This post here, how can I say this? Well, let's just read his post, and then this is an issue with social media. So the brother wrote, I was informed by a scholar whom I trust that in Bradford, he's talking about the UK, there have been cases where individuals have memorized the entire Quran and studied several years in the Alamiya program that have then left Islam. I also mentioned several cases where people have become apostates. Sorry, I gotta use my glasses. He also mentioned several cases where people have become apostates but continue to pray, etc., so they don't get canceled by their families. This shows that knowledge itself cannot save a person. Environment, usage of internet and social media, exposure to doubts and various ideologies, all can be part of the problem. The scholar also offered me to speak to some of these people whom he was currently in dialogue with. Protecting our Iman and the Iman of our future generation should be our first priority. Sectarian polemical discourses such as Barelwi versus Deobandi ought to be completely avoided. In fact, they are counterproductive to our society. Now, this might sound like, oh, wow, this is good advice. Now, obviously, the person makes some points here. But ironically, this is one of the issues of social media, that you run to social media and you broadcast something. So one of the issues here, I think, is the uncritical, I don't know, maybe the brother didn't think it through, maybe he did, but I think you have to be careful of the power of suggestion. So this person is saying that social media can be a detriment to a person's faith, to a person's Iman. I don't argue that whatsoever. But then coming and broadcasting about other people leaving the faith, I think you should be careful. Not that you want to sweep these things under the rug, but I think you do need to be careful about the power of suggestion. Secondly, there are so many things that are at stake or going on here that are far beyond simply a person just simply up and say, okay, that's it, I'm leaving Islam. Here, I'm going to blow this up for you guys a little bit because I want you to get a better look at what was written here. So, this is way bigger than just simply, I was on the internet and I left Islam. I think that also does some short shrift, to use a term, that does some short shrift as to why somebody would leave Islam. I'm not saying that those things don't play a contributing role, but to simply lay that at the feet of social media, I think is a little bit short-sighted and a little too convenient and concise. So, yeah, that's a little bit too easy just to say that. Sorry, somebody's asking me a question. Let me just respond to their question here. Let's see. All right. So the other issue is, I just feel like, be careful of sharing such negative news that, this might be a problem. And I'm not, again, suggesting that we sweep anything under, rugs, but just putting that out there as negativity, it can be distressing. Other Muslims will see this and be like, oh man, the thought of other people leaving their faith. And especially, I think also there's an assumption, because a person memorized the Quran. One, and I know this might really upset some people, but there's a stark difference between hifz of Quran, whether you like it or not. There is a stark difference between hifz of Quran and understanding the Quran. Many hufaz, right? Many people that memorize the Quran, especially if they are ajam, and I know this will sound biased, but I'm not an Arab. But many that are not Arab, that don't speak the Arabic language or really intimately understand it, then they just merely memorize the sounds. You know, mashallah, that's a wonderful accomplishment. But again, perhaps this myopic focus on memorization of Quran is what is leading to people not having a secure foundation in their faith, such that if they did come across something on the internet or TV or whatever and it caused them to have doubts, I think this might be an issue. Again, when you say the Alamiya program, well, we need to examine like what is covered in that. How thorough is that program? Because, you know, like I was telling somebody the other day about ijaza. Getting an ijaza doesn't mean that a person knows anything about that subject in the modern day, right? Ijaza used to be something in the distant pre-modern past that a person would go through an entire gauntlet of study, such that then when they would arrive to the point where they might get ijaza and this or that, they had really had a significant amount of study under their belt. I really feel like there's maybe a little bit of assumption here that because they did this program, it's such a shock. You know, I myself have actually known a few people in this situation. Our community does not really prize lifelong study. It doesn't prize, you know, long-term diligent study of the Quran and the other Islamic sciences. You know, we turn out people in some of these factories like a half of the Quran factory. You know, you come in here, and especially at a young age, and we, you know, get you to memorize the Quran, and then boom, you're out. And I'm always astonished when I see people that are so young, like people that are like less than 50 years old, being referred to as sheikh. This is insane. You know, when I've seen a number of very prominent Muslim figures that have been, you know, bestowed by the public this mantle of imama and sheikh, and are turned loose to, you know, be imam and sheikh, you know, in the community. And then sometimes they make some really major mistakes. Part of it is they just simply they lack the life experience, and they're not settled enough in themselves. I think especially in the modern day age where, you know, adolescence can extend into your 30s, just being honest, as somebody who, you know, I'm from a slightly different era. You know, I'm in my 50s, and I see a big difference in the maturity of people today in their 30s and even in their 40s compared to my generation, let alone the generation before me. And so I think there's a lot of assumption here about the capacity of these people. Because to be quite honest, if just simply going on the internet can cause a person to lose their faith, then one, there's more going on here underneath the hood than just, oh, they memorized the Quran. But then two, I think there's not enough going on in whatever this program is. So when he says, right, he also mentioned several cases where people had become apostates by continuing to pray, etc., so they don't get canceled by their families. This shows that, you know, knowledge itself cannot save a person. I mean, on one hand, sure, you could say that because knowledge is one thing, and we know there's different types of knowledge. The Prophet, alayhi salawatu wasalam, he asked Allah in dua, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa'. Oh Allah, I seek, you know, your protection from knowledge that does not benefit. So I think that you have to take this in a certain kind of, you have to be careful, man. That's a very That statement is not sufficient to say that that knowledge cannot save a person. That's not true, right? If you're saying any old knowledge, okay, but obviously there is knowledge that is beneficial that indeed can save a person. So, excuse me, I don't feel like this is really all that incredibly well thought out. This shows that knowledge itself cannot save a person. Environment, usage of internet and social media, exposure to doubts by various ideologies, all can be part of the problem. They can, but again, I think it really depends on, everybody's exposure, because everybody's default setting is different. So, I went through college as a young Muslim. I was exposed to all kinds of very sophisticated forms of philosophy. In fact, I even took many actually philosophy classes because I found them fascinating, and also I wanted to learn about them so that I would be able to understand what underpins them, so that I could, rebuff them. I went through college. I dealt with all of the sexual temptations. I've encountered every kind of ideology that you can think of. And I'm not trying to use myself as a base standard. I'm just saying that there's more going on underneath the hood. And so I think for young Muslims, especially for like young, I'm just going to go out on a limb here. He's talking about the UK. He's talking about Bradford. So we're probably talking about some young Desi cats, right? Some young Indo-Pakistani kids over in the UK that also might be dealing with issues of inferiority in that society. There's so many other things that have to be discussed in order to just simply say, ideologies and the internet is what brought them down. Especially of wanting to let the so-called Alamiya program off the hook. The scholar also offered me to speak to some of these people with whom he was currently in dialogue with. So protecting our Iman and the Iman of our future generation should be our first priority. I agree with that. That is a major priority. But I don't think that they're just talking about sectarian polemical discourses should be avoided at all costs. Actually, maybe talking about some of those, it's not that talking about sectarian differences, the differences between Barelwi and Deobandi, Salafi, Sufi, Maliki, Hanafi, whatever, Athari, Maturidi, Ash'ari. It isn't that these differences shouldn't be talked about. They actually should be talked about, but they should be discussed by first the teachers that have the capacity, the intelligence, the hilm and the ilm, right? The forbearance, the knowledge, the maturity to discuss these things so that people can do so in an environment that's safe. This is what I call like the judo or the dojo. We need to treat Islamic studies like the dojo. What do I mean? When you go to, if you've ever studied any kind of martial art, right, and you go to the dojo, like if you have a really good teacher and they ask you, okay, now I'm going to demonstrate the flip or the throw or the chokehold or, whatever that it is, and they point to you. And so you step up, and so, your teacher, your sensei, your shifu, they're gonna kind of toss you around like a little rag doll to demonstrate what these techniques do. If your teacher has the ilm and the hilm, if they have the knowledge and the forbearance, and if they really care about you and you trust your teacher, then you can get tossed around, but you know that your teacher isn't trying to harm you, even if it is a little bit uncomfortable, even if you do get banged up a little bit, right? We need to have kind of the, we need to have this kind of dojo approach to it. So just saying like, oh, we shouldn't talk about any differences between groups. No, I think actually this is the problem, because whether you talk about them or not, they're going to be talked about by the ideologues, by the internet, by the social media. And so it is much better to bring them out in the open in a controlled, safe environment, and then have them to discuss. So I don't know if this is really that well thought out. This is such a bizarre, right? It does look staged. I have to say it looks staged. All right. Yeah, look at what they're doing. Now, again, I'm no apologist or have no romantic associations or affiliations about Erdogan, or Erdogan. I'm not really ever sure how to say his name. This is the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs. Here he threatens Erdogan with suffering the same fate as Saddam Hussein for threatening Israel. For those who don't know, during the Gulf War, Saddam actually launched 39 ballistic missiles at Israel, which hit Tel Aviv. Israel saw him as a persistent threat to their national security. Israel lobbied the United States government for a number of years to push for a war in Iraq, with Netanyahu addressing Congress and urging them to take action. Americans were told the Iraq war was due to Iraq's involvement in 9/11 and possessing weapons of mass destruction. Of course, now we know this is a bunch of horse doo-doo. Both turned out to be false, and they knew it was false. Here, Israeli foreign minister clearly acknowledges that the Iraq war was due to Saddam's government posing a risk to the existence of Israel. This is also a non-NATO country threatening a NATO country. Not one Israeli soldier took part in the Iraq war. Approximately 5,000 U.S. troops died in the Iraq war. Over 300 troops in the UK and other coalition countries also died. Approximately 1 million Iraqi civilians died. Not in the military, but civilians. Over 2 million Iraqis fled the country as refugees. Now, think about all the other wars in the Middle East since 1948, and think about whose wars we're really fighting for. You've been lied to for far too long. Israel is no ally of the West. Israel is no enemy of the West. Israel is the enemy of the West. Erdogan follows in the footsteps of Saddam Hussein and threatens to attack Israel. Just let him remember what happened there and how it ended. That again is from the Israeli foreign minister. Oh man, I can't believe this guy's still around, right? Alex Jones. What a man! Talk about, I mean, my man's got more lives than a cat, right? Alex Jones, the man on the left. Wow, the man on the left. The man on the left is a man, and he has been dating Macron since he was 14. I have to admit, though, some weird stuff going on. Seriously, when the heck did Emmanuel Macron marry? Yeah, that's pretty wild. Here's another guy that pops up on my feed a lot, Gerald Celente. It's kind of like this eccentric guy from New York who talks about trends forecasting, but he has some really funny commentary. I've caught a few of his videos, and he's very, very pro-Palestine, very, very critical of Israel and the Zionists. So he tweets, Lindsay needs to put on his military drag and lead the charge. Right, the Biden-Harris administration has enriched the Iranian Ayatollah, and Israel is paying the price. This is from Lindsey Graham. And it's true. Why is it that it's always these crazy war hawks that never, ever, ever would even strap up a combat boot, let alone anything else?
Until Iran will notice that we're going to hold you accountable for attacks by Hezbollah and Hamas against Israel, you're going to get more of the same. The attack of October the 7th was designed to stop normalization, in my view, between Saudi Arabia and Israel. So until the Iranians believe they're going to get hit, that we start putting their oil refineries on a target list, you're going to get more of this. When it comes to Iran, Biden-Harris have been a colossal failure in terms of controlling the Ayatollah. They've enriched him, and Israel's paying the price.
I think this is the other thing we should be wary of in Trump 2.0, and what maybe is likely the re-election, or no, whatever, the second election of Trump as president, is that, again, in the first round, Trump was like anti-establishment, Second time around, he is very much pro-establishment. And so I think that the sort of remnants of the neocons, as I said, I think overall the neocons have largely aged out. The older ones that were with Bush 1 and 2, they have largely aged out. And I include Hillary Clinton in that. So it's not only the Republicans, but you also have the sort of Democrat neocons, right? So Hillary Clinton really isn't much different in that regard. So largely they have aged out and they're being replaced by what I call the technocons, right? These people like Thiel and Musk that are slowly marrying private sector, venture capitalism, big tech companies that are invested in things like AI and surveillance and so on, and are garnering these big military contracts. That it's almost like a kind of slow privatization of the CIA. I think in Trump 2.0, we're going to see also him allowing the last older guard of the, we're going to see the last older guard of the neocons, like Lindsey Graham. Where before, like he got rid of the John Boltons, even though he initially hired him, but then fired him. I think we're going to see a different, something different for that. So that was the guy I was talking about yesterday, right? Owen Benjamin, who has been critical of Israel, but at the same time has been very, very kind of just making stupid comments about Palestine, and Palestinians should just pack up and go and just let it all go. Again, stop putting your stock in celebrities. Again, Dr. Anastasia writes, is this accurate? She quotes looks like another tweet or something. Right-wing Jews promote wars that displace Muslims from their native lands. Left-wing Jews open Western borders to aid displaced Muslims. Result, Israeli dominance in the Mideast while lowering the risk of nationalism, manifesting in Western nations. Perfect synergy. I don't know. That sounds a little bit too convenient. But there probably is some half-truth in that. Anyway. Wow. I'm sick of this blank for years and will never pretend it's normal. I'm glad to see many others finally speaking against this nonsense. Like, wow. Yeah, well, this is now Western civilization. So I think that's as good a place as any to leave it. Gonna pack up and go. Yep. All right. We'll see you for the next one.
Hey,
Assalamu alaikum.
I'm talking to you. Hey. Hey, I'm talking to you. Hey.
You know the kind of man you are.
You don't know one thing about me. Hey, I'm talking to you.
I warned you!
Hey. Hey, I'm talking. You don't know one thing about me.